thesis topic was really just I was seeing a lot about the food industry in headlines and reading articles about it, and it really just became something that I was super interested in and wanted to know more about. And so I decided to focus on my thesis topic on the food industry. I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming to support all of us this afternoon. This is just such a big event, and we're really thankful. And yeah, I just hope that all of these presentations are something we can learn from and grow from and just change from. I want to start by asking a question. How much do we really know about our food industry? To answer that question, we have to first ask ourselves a couple of other questions. Where's our food coming from? What companies are in charge of the food that we eat? What ingredients are in the food that we consume? In considering these questions, there's probably an alert going off in some of your minds that maybe we don't really know all that much about our food industry. And I would challenge you today to consider those questions. And I hope to prove to you why our food system is largely broken. The food industry's focus on profit and mass production is misleading our choices, damaging our quality of food, and harming the overall health of Americans. In order to understand the food industry as a whole, we have to first look at some background information to understand different regulations and different protocols that the food system has. First, focusing on the FDA. So the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration, is something that America has in place to regulate our food system. Its job is to control the food ingredients that are in a food and give Americans a sense of comfort and, again, control. So the Food and Drug Administration in America is much different than that of other countries. Looking at Europe for an example. In Europe, the policies that they have is that when an ingredient wants to be entered into the system, it is tested and evaluated for however long it takes until that is proven safe. In Europe, once it is proven safe, it is then entered into the system. America has a much different way of going about this. In America, something is entered into the system and then tested and proven safe. The Food and Drug Administration allows things in and then only takes them out when they have found to cause risk. As you can imagine, this leaves a lot of room for error. There have been countless times where things have been entered into the system and it's later proven that they are harmful and dangerous. Additionally, a lot of the foods that Europe is still in the testing policies with, America has no regulations on whatsoever. Another subcategory of the FDA that I would like to focus on as some background is grass, or generally recognized as safe. This is something that was invented by the FDA in 1958. And it was originally created for a good use. It was so that companies didn't have to go through the long and trying process of getting each and every food ingredient approved. GRAS was a way of providing a list for companies to look at and have pre-approved ingredients and additives already on that list. It sounds harmless. Today, however, GRAS is being completely misused. Generally recognized as safe, things are not only approved by the FDA, companies are using a loophole found in the definition. The GRAS definition says something can be approved as generally recognized as safe as long as a specialized expert signs off on it. The specialized expert does not have to come from inside the FDA, does not have to come from the government. It can actually come from the company which is making the food and getting the profit. With that background information on the FDA and the food industry as a whole, I would like to move into the first point, that our ease of choice is being misled. Focusing first on advertising strategies and manipulations. Advertising strategies are something that every company uses. Marketing skills are something that is highly sought after. We as Americans are very visual people. When we see good things on a food bag, we assume that the food is good. When we see a beautiful, luscious cornfield and read words like healthy, good, fresh, we assume as much in the food, when that's really just an advertisement strategy. Something else that they are doing to mislead us is the use of ingredient list diversing. What I mean by that is, in an ingredient list, the highest used ingredient in the food has to be at the top. Companies know this, and their way around it is saying one thing in a bunch of smaller words. For example, they don't want sugar to come up at the top of the list, and so they'll say dextrose, fructose corn syrup, and sugar towards the bottom. Again, we as consumers are looking at the packaging, assuming there's not a high amount of sugar in it, when it really is just a marketing strategy to get us to buy more food. Another huge thing that is misleading us is the number of manufacturers in the food industry. Big food companies are completely monopolizing the market. Companies like Kellogg, General Mills, PepsiCo, and Post are in complete control of the market. When we go to a grocery store, we see countless of different options on the food shelf. We assume that because there are multiple different products, there are multiple different manufacturers and multiple different companies. This is not true at all. With a $91.85 billion revenue in 2024, PepsiCo owns 27% of the soft drink market, 87% of the market in the dip category, and 60% in the chip category. This is just one company that is doing this. PepsiCo has completely monopolized the market, and we aren't even aware that they own everything. Now, the monopolization of the market wouldn't be as big of a deal if they were actually adding good and quality things into our food. Which brings me to my second point, that our quality of food is being damaged. With this quality of food being damaged, there are a couple ways that companies are doing this. The first reason is pesticide use. Now, there are different types of pesticides, natural and synthetic. Synthetic are the ones that we're talking about, and synthetics are the ones that are largely used by these food companies. Now, food companies have put out a lot of statements saying, pesticides are dangerous in high amounts and safe in low amounts. We're using the low amounts. And each company is not actually defining their terms of what high or low means. So we as consumers are reading this and saying, we're safe, it's a low amount, when different companies have different thresholds for high and low completely. A specific study looked at female spouses of pesticide applicators and found that 30,000 of these women who had a high exposure to pesticides were at a high risk for hormone-related cancers. This study has found that synthetic pesticides have incredible effects on the human body. And furthermore, in 2001, the Stockholm Convention was brought to action. A bunch of countries realized that pesticide use and synthetic pesticides in general were dangerous, and some of them needed to be put to an end. They tried to get the US to sign this convention, and the US signed but has not ratified its policies. The reason the US hasn't changed anything is because they said that they cannot instill these policies. We as America have not chosen to take out these synthetic pesticides that we know to be harmful. And companies are largely misusing them for their own profit and mass manipulation. Another thing that is hurting our quality of food is additives and preservatives in the food we eat. Additives and preservatives are something that, again, is for marketing. It keeps the food on the shelf longer. It adds better texture and lightness to a food. It brightens the color, making it more enticing to our eyes. Additives and preservatives are not food. They're more of a far cry from a food. They're these fake substances, chemical substances that are added into our foods, and a lot of these substances have been linked to a number of health issues. And the last thing I'd like to focus on that's hurting our quality of food is GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. Specifically, under the category of GMOs is nitrates. Nitrates are primarily something that's added into meats. And nitrates are actually not a bad thing at all. Nitrates are found in air and water and soil and a lot of vegetables. Nitrates are safe when they have high levels of antioxidants present. When companies are taking nitrates and adding them chemically into foods such as meat, those levels of antioxidants are not present. And what actually happens is the food does not break down the same in our system. So something that goes from something very healthy and necessary for us has now changed into something that is hurting us more than anything else. Like I said, our quality of food is leading us down a path of bad health. It's leading us to a place where we as Americans can't trust what we are eating. Which brings me to my third point, that our health is being harmed. There has been a rise in diseases in Americans for the past couple of years. We have seen things like obesity, heart disease, autoimmune disease, and food allergies skyrocket over the past couple of years. And when you look at those things next to a progression of the food and our food industry changing, it is clear that that is what the issue is. These diseases are affecting us. The food we are eating is affecting us, and it is prevalent in today's society. America is actually one of the leading companies in their healthcare system. We are supposedly supposed to be one of the healthiest nations, and yet that's not true. We have all of these issues. Another specific thing that I'd like to focus on in terms of health is our children. There is major manipulation and targeting happening to children's food specifically. A study done by Bloomberg Law selected 33 baby foods out of a grocery store aisle. They found, after testing, that 32 of the 33 baby foods tested contained at least 2 of 3 heavy metals of lead, arsenic, and cadmium. They tested 33 and found that 32 contained the metals. Bloomberg Law found this, and a couple of years ago brought this information to the FDA. And so far, the only thing that the FDA has regulated is 90% of juices. The FDA has not taken the steps to reel back the regulations. They have not taken the steps to change the food industry based on this information. And it is clear that kids are being targeted. There is different manipulations, there's different advertisement strategies for children alone that needs to be paid attention to. Now, a lot of people might be asking, how can we attribute all of these health issues to food alone? Can't there be other issues? My answer to that would be that it is clear when looking at a scale and a comparison of the two, of our food industry and where it's leading us, and our health problems, that the two are connected. The old saying, you are what you eat, is incredibly clear. A lot of it is because of our food. Now, I won't say that there isn't some other rare cases, and that obviously you can have health problems without food, but I do believe it is a major part of it. Another thing that someone might say in opposition is that the current system is too large to be changed, that we need the use of synthetic pesticides, that we need GMOs, that we have too many people to feed, and we need to have a way of getting them fast food now. My refutation to this point would be that our food industry can be changed in simple ways. One way would be to diversify the production of it, to take back control from large companies and simply have more options for Americans. Have options of a large company and have options of a smaller company as well. Overall, I would like to remind you all that the food industry's focus on profit and mass production is misleading our choices, damaging our quality of food, and harming the overall health of Americans. Coming back to that question, how much do we really know about our food industry? I would hope that after today, you would understand a little bit more about where your food is coming from. You would understand what companies are in charge of the food you eat, and have a better understanding of what ingredients are in the food we consume. It is important to know where our food is coming from and what we are eating. Now, there are obviously big steps that need to happen, but additionally, there are small steps that everyone can take today. There are simple things like eating whole foods instead of processed foods, looking at the ingredient list with intention, good intentions, and different websites and apps available to help everyone. My hope is that people would take time to consider the foods that they're eating and truly have a better understanding of what's happening in our food industry instead of just trusting other people to regulate what they're choosing to eat. Thank you. Any questions from the judges?
Sure. That was great. I think your presentation was wonderful, especially having read the paper. It's right in line with the whole, outline and stuff that you've done here. As a healthcare provider myself, this really sits home because I hear this stuff every day, from patients and other care providers as well, that there's all kinds of issues, not just with food industry, but, with just how do we encourage people to be healthy, even with their eating styles and habits and stuff. And there's so much that's linked to that, as you well described in here. Just lots. But more specifically with regards to, I thought it was really interesting how you mainly compared the American industry versus the European and the European regulation, the boards and things that rule the European one. So my question to you, again, you explained some of it in here, but as far as why do you think there's such different regulatory processes within America versus Europe?
I've done a little bit of research on this, and I've found that a lot of it is just because because they have the universal healthcare system, they typically have tighter procedures on everything. And in America, we have just looser policies because I think our focus is more on, well, you choose and you make the choice, and kind of having an open hand policy of it, which, while I do understand it from that perspective, I also think there's a line at which you have to draw it. You should help people to make those conscious choices instead of leading them to bad choices, making them believe that they're good.
Yeah, I was also interested in that as well. I was curious when I was reading your paper too, like if there was a comparison between, you talked about the ultra processed foods, and is America the leading consumer of those ultra processed foods?
It's high on the list. I don't know if it's the leading country of them, but there's certainly a large focus in America with those foods.
One of my other questions, I just thought it was so depressing that they're targeting kids and baby foods. I think my stomach felt sick for like an hour after I read that paragraph. But how would you encourage or instruct or educate? How would you, what steps would you advise a family to take? You may very well have a family someday yourself. Like, how would you handle the foods for your children and for yourself?
I think it really comes back to those final simple steps of you don't have to, break the bank buying completely organic, homemade children's food. A lot of it is just getting away from processed foods in general. I think there is a lot to be said for, the food that is God-given and grown from the ground is always going to be better than something you buy on the shelves. And so I think that would be my main focus, is focusing on whole foods instead of processed foods, largely.
So again, along those same lines, you mentioned that America is the largest consumer of the ultra processed ones. I mean, obviously almost everything is processed to some degree. And also knowing you know, you talked about the misconception about natural foods and definition of natural versus the definition of organic, and what do you really think is good or bad, you know, to us as we actually, what is in here, is it natural or is it organic and what? And, you know, where is it coming from? So I think a lot of it has to do with, you trusting what you're eating. And so the ability to actually make choices on your own as Americans. And, you know, so my question to you is also, why do you think America in general has the highest rate of wanting to consume the majority of their diet being ultra processed versus whole foods?
I think a lot of it is just ease. I mean, on those charts, when you look at a chart of obesity and heart disease, and then you look at a chart of like in the 1950s and 60s when microwave meals were becoming super popular, there's direct correlation there. So I think that speaks a lot. Like, America is just a fast-paced society. You can even see it when you are overseas in other countries, just like our culture around food is much different. And so I think we're so focused on fast. How can I get fast food? How can I get a fast microwave meal? That we're not as concerned with the quality of what we're eating. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that does. That's good.
I was curious, like, how has your ideas about food, or if they've shifted, how have they shifted from the beginning of your research to now?
I think going into it, I thought it was going to be more about food, and I thought it was going to be more about the health and like, here's what you should eat and this is good, and something that shocked me was the more market side of it. Like, I ended up finding myself more interested in just the manipulation of these companies, and they're doing all of this stuff without a lot of people knowing about it. And so I think going in, I had a much gentler view of like, maybe the companies were trying their best and they're just not able to do it, but now I think my perspective has changed of like, they have to be aware to some degree that this is just a fight for power in some ways.
Yeah, you mentioned that the, you know, the big companies have monopolized the food industry and are filled with greed. You know, that's a pretty strong word. You know, the way I look at that also is that the food industry still is a business, and they're working towards making a profit for themselves, just like all the other good things, even the organic farmers, they're still trying to look for a profit that's going to keep their business going. So, can you think of any other kind of industries that you could perhaps describe as being greedy, or trying to self-serve their own business?
I mean, I think every company to some extent has that idea of greed, of you want to make profit, you want to have a turnaround sale. I think that the biggest issue with the food company is they're like marketing it. They're saying it's good and healthy when it's not. I think it would be different if they were marketing it differently and saying, obviously, yes, they're trying for the policy, but they're not telling us the wrong thing, if that makes sense. As for other companies that have been doing it, I honestly would have to look into it more. Nothing is coming to the top of my head on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of was taking your whole paper as kind of the whole American food industry, which is just everybody who supplies food sources, drink sources, I guess. So, I mean, it also, as a physician, I think of even the healthcare system. Our industry is essentially the same. You know, where we provide a service and we're getting remunerated for it, and we need to make a profit. And just even in our little community here, and I've been here for 22 years or so, just think of how much our healthcare has changed even in that short period of time, as we've been rebranded with, you know, Spectrum and this and that and this and that. Now Corewell, but that's because it's an industry.
Yeah.
And the bottom line, we want to have a good product. We want to have enough time to do it, and quality product and also the volume. So you mentioned that and this gets towards the end of your paper, of, that you can notice some paths, and if you can explain that further, paths that big companies, food providers can allow to make these more healthy choices when they're providing our food, but to keep the volume up and to keep the quality up.
I think my the biggest thing that would make the most impact is just diversifying it. Like there are a lot of farmers and smaller companies that are going out of business because they can't keep up with the same quota as the larger companies, and so instead of having thousands of cattle on one farm that's owned by a huge company, I think it would be better to have, 10, 20 smaller farms that are supplying that, and then each individual person, you're not then having to take care of 1,000. You're only taking care of, 50 or 20 or however many. I think that would be the biggest step, and I also think there are other things that's just not shortcutting it. Like there are things that wouldn't drive up their marketing price too much, but it's just ways that maybe not having such an emphasis on cutting corners and just kind of being more middle ground, and like not going through the Grass Act, and just maybe getting those things actually pre-approved and situations like that.
This might be way out there, but I was just curious if any of your research happened to include any of those food company CEOs' diets. I wonder what they're eating, if they're aware of what they're doing to the Americans. I was just curious if you happened across any of that. It's sort of an out there thought, but.
Yeah, I haven't, but that is interesting. I definitely will probably go home and look into that.
Did any of your research raise other questions that you didn't have time to put into your paper, but just like, oh, I wonder, did anything else come up as you were researching?
Largely, I think I really would have loved to, like, kind of what you just said, go more into like specifics of the companies. I was kind of having to keep it in more of a broad sense, but it was very interesting. Like when I was looking into PepsiCo specifically for that one statistic that I was mentioning, it's very interesting to break down the singular companies as a whole. So I think if I could go deeper, that's what I would look into.
How will this affect you personally, or maybe it already has? Like, what changes or thought, changes in your thinking or actions, do you think might be a product of this?
I mean, since doing this research, I definitely look at the food industry as a whole and just differently. And when I'm eating, I think I've really been trying to be conscious of the things that I'm eating, the things that I'm purchasing, and and also like sharing with people around me too, because I do think it is important. But it definitely has changed me in some ways where I'm sometimes like, I wish I didn't know this piece of information. I know too much now. But yeah, it definitely has changed me, and I've grown from it a lot, I think.
Well, I just wanted to commend your organization of your paper and your presentation. It was very easy to follow your thesis and your main points, so good job on that.
Yeah, you again mentioned the FDA a lot in your presentation as well. I was trying to figure out what really with that Stockholm Convention since 2001, about why hasn't the U.S. acted on that? I mean, is it a political issue, kind of like where the government says yes or no versus any other body of people?
I think that obviously individual companies have the choice to dispose of those things. The Stockholm Convention, from what I found looking into it, and I wasn't able to go into that as deep as I wanted to, is that basically the U.S. reason for not ratifying the policies is that they kind of had the presumption that it was like it was too much to do. It was too many things to cut out, too many thin things to replace, and so they kind of slid by saying that's a good idea, but not changing anything, because they weren't at the position where they felt like they could change, based on what the food industry was doing at the time and now too.
I think on an individual level, you can feel that overwhelm too. If you go into a supermarket and you're like, okay, I'm gonna eat healthy, but then you're trying to overhaul everything, it can become very overwhelming very quickly. So I think that you had given some good steps, you know, just being conscious and going to Whole Foods. Are there any other additional encouragements that you would give individuals, if they wanted to overhaul their diet, like to start small so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming?
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming but not impossible. I think it definitely does take more effort to look at the ingredient list and make conscious choices, but it's something that's important. So, yeah, I mean, really just those things that I mentioned at the end is, I think are the best, simplest steps to take.
I think some of the stumbling block when we're making choices in the grocery stores is also the time and the money that we have available. So there's, you know, lots of, you know, consumers that don't have the time and money to put into efforts of trying to figure out what's most healthy or what's the least healthy. And then also that shelf life, and we didn't talk too much about it in the paper, but you know, those expiration dates, the infamous expiration dates, that we all learn to love and adore. But, so yeah, I mean, looking at that in the stores, but also, you know, what you want on yourself, what you're able to eat within your family, you know, when you're purchasing, you know, if you have, you know, a short amount of time, you can't look at the ingredients, you know, that well. And then you have those innocent, disclosures, you know, that they rename, these bad substances, like, what is it, carmine? And those are things that kind of scare people, you know, when they don't really even, they can't really even understand what they're even reading. So it's hard to look at the general public and say, we're gonna educate you to make enough more healthy choices. Because then that also goes into the market issue, you know, what's gonna sell the easiest, fastest, and the most. So, but as far as, so eating like whole foods or local foods, as well as, and knowing where they're grown, organically or not. Did you have any idea about the definition of organic and what that really means? Like even when you grow a watermelon organically, or when you get a box of granola that says organic on it, what is that, you know, did you come up with any kind of like true definitions of what those things mean?
I didn't look specifically into the definition of like an organic thing. There are some things, while there are terms that are companies are able to use without any truth behind them, there are certain things like there are certain things on packages that have to be true. Like you can't, there's certain things that you can't say, and obviously companies will kind of say it in a different way and kind of go around it in that way, but I do believe that organic is one of those things that you cannot advertise unless it is true. I do think that. And I also do know that, I don't have an extensive list, but for some, like, I understand that organic produce is much more expensive than regular, and I do know that certain produce, certain foods are kind of similar, organic and non-organic, too, that, again, I would like to personally look into more, but I do know that that's another option for a consumer as well.
Those are all the questions that I have, but I just want to commend you on the job well done.
Any audience questions?
You mentioned an app, excuse me, an app that could help you discover what's in I think it's even for lotions, anything you put in the body. I know my daughters, they like scan the package.
Yep.
Can you share what that app is? You know what that is?
Yeah, I have it. It's actually called Yuka, Y-U-K-A. Yeah, so that's a great example of a way to do it as well. Yeah, you literally hold it up to the barcode and it breaks down the additives in the food and gives it a rating of like 0 to 100 too. So yeah, that's a great tool. all so much.
Okay, how about a big thank you? Welcome to transition time. It's time to drink and be merry.